फोटो शार्प पर ठीक है।
Hi viewers, welcome to this latest podcast, and we have with us today a very special guest, Dr. Ashwani Mahajan ji, who is the National Co-Convenor of Swadeshi Jagaran Manch. He's an economist, he's an author, he's a columnist, and especially he has specialization on Swadeshi economics, which is a distinct stream of economics that has been emerging over the last a few decades. And his body of work is seminal on these issues. And today we are going to talk to him about this latest US tariff war, what many people are calling it tariff wars. What are its implications for India? When we look at the Swadeshi economics, what is the roadmap in context to Swadeshi economics? Does Swadeshi proponents of Swadeshi economics do they stand vindicated by what is happening? And what is the road ahead, especially because Donald Trump has threatened India and many other countries with reciprocal tariffs. So it's a very volatile situation. Let's try to make some sense out of it and de-organize the whole thing. So, Dr. Mahajan, thank you so much for joining us on such a short notice.
थैंक यू।
Dr. Mahajan, my first question is that what do you make out of this thing? If you can just demystify a little bit about this Donald Trump in his second presidency going for a tariff kind of a war, what you say, against most of the nation, and especially India. Would prefer to talk more about the Indian context.
Already the same US which has pushed us to WTO in the so-called rule-based trading system. The same US is now threatening to demolish these rules by charging unilateral tariffs. You know, in WTO system, the tariffs are decided by mutual understanding amongst the nations, and we had been given some bound rates. Similarly, US and other countries were also given some bound rates, and they were bound by that. But now, since we are following those bound rates, rather we are much less than those bound rates. For instance, we have an average bound rate of 50.8% of tariff, whereas we are imposing hardly 6 to 8% tariffs on an average. So we are not only following the WTO rules, we are over following them for our so-called love for free trade and lower tariffs. We wanted to show to the world that yes, despite the fact we have the high bound rates which we are supposed to charge, but we are actually imposing much lower tariffs. Now, in this scenario, when US is imposing unilateral tariffs, not only on India, for other countries as well, so it would make sense for US to charge higher tariffs and help themselves. But it is not the case. In fact, when you charge high tariffs, when you impose protective tariffs, your only objective should be that your own industry will flourish. Now, since US doesn't have any such industry, and if they impose higher tariffs on Indian products or products from other countries, they are going to face huge inflation. And that's the only reason, when Mr. Trump decided to raise tariffs and he declared the date 2nd April, immediately the markets crashed in US. So you can understand that markets understand the scenario better than the president. And in this case, now the question is that it's a fact that tariff is going to be increased, not only for India, for other countries as well. Now, we have to take our own decisions. We have to see how we can go about. Now, I look at it from the point of India, that what opportunities this tariff war gives us. For instance, if US imposes tariff on say China or Mexico or Canada or other countries, definitely those countries would be losing their markets in US because of the high tariffs. And if we are able to negotiate with US and take some time in negotiation, by the time this happens, we will start capturing markets in US. So we should look at it from the point of view of uh, our economy, our exports. And I do see that whether it is US or Europe or other countries, especially US, they don't want to have much dealing with China. So China is the biggest exporter to US. And if we are able to capture a part of that market, it will be a win-win situation for India.
Dr. Mahajan, the United States Commerce Secretary was here in New Delhi for a conclave a couple days ago, and as the news reports have come, that he specifically talked about India should be opening its farm sector for larger imports from United States. Now, you have been consistently writing about it, talking about it. You have taken up the issue with the policymakers also, and you have been there has been a kind of a it's a big no kind of a thing, especially in the Indian context. It's a very sensitive matter. How do you see this pressure on by the United States for India to open its farm sector for greater imports? And do you think it is going to happen? If it is not going to happen, or can it happen selectively? So, how do you see this?
See, Arun, this mm, agriculture has been a very contentious issue in the trade agreements, in trade talks, because agriculture is not a business in India. It is a way of life, and we cannot put our agriculture at risk or the livelihood of our farmers, small farmers, at risk. Agriculture is very much different in India as compared to US, and therefore there can't be any comparison between the US agriculture and Indian agriculture. And if we see, if we uh, if we open our agriculture sector to US, uh, our farmers will be very badly affected. And if you see, uh, the question is, uh, the very obvious question would be that if we reduce tariffs and they also reduce tariffs, we will capture the markets in US. We will have greater access in US agricultural markets. But our research shows that US gives so much of subsidy, and they make it sure that US prices are always lower than the international prices. And therefore, no country, if US is not willing uh, that country to supply agricultural products, no country can export to US. And therefore, imagining that if they also reduce tariffs, we also reduce tariffs, we can have access in US markets is not correct. And therefore, we have to be very cautious. US has already been supplying a lot of agricultural products, say uh, almonds are there and other products there, and California apples are there. We have been importing hugely from US, and but so far as the other agricultural produce are concerned, they are for a class, so that can really uh, work. But if we allow and block opening up of our agricultural markets, it's not going to be good for our Indian agriculturists. And we know uh, approximately half of our workforce is in agriculture. And this is going to be disastrous. And therefore, as we know, Indian government is very sensitive and sensitized over agriculture. It was agriculture and dairy only which led to the debacle of RCEP. And if we uh, If we see, if I say, if history is any guide, uh, Indian government is not going to budge on this issue.
So one last question. Uh, I'll combine this. There are two parts of this question. One is that uh, is it end of WTO because China went to WTO, but the way US is unilaterally taking decision, and as you said rightly in the beginning, that it's ironical that US initially pushed India into the WTO, and now it is kind of giving two hoots to the WTO norms. So, do you think it is the end of WTO, or at least over the next 2 years, the WTO becomes very irrelevant? And second, that there has been a talk about a bilateral agreement which is going to happen between on which both the US and the Indian government are working. The Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson has also said that they are looking at it as a viable solution. So, do you think this kind of a bilateral agreement can basically resolve issues? And probably these kind of bilateral agreements are going to become the norm as till the Trump era continues.
First question: this end of WTO started 8 years ago with Trump coming in, joining a US president seat uh, in his first inning. The first thing he did, that he blocked the appointment of judges in the WTO dispute panel, and that is what you call the crux and the basis of the WTO system. If you don't if you don't have robust dispute settlement system, WTO is gone, and from there started the end of WTO. Now in his second inning, he is attacking even harder by attacking the uh, very crux of WTO, that these tariffs are decided mutually. They had already been decided. It's not that they have to be decided now. They are already decided. And now when US is imposing reciprocal tariffs, so-called reciprocal tariffs, when we already have the liberty of charging higher tariffs, still we are charging lower tariffs. It's true that India is charging higher tariffs on agricultural produce, because I told you that India is very sensitive about and sensitized about the uh, plight of our farmers. Now, coming to the second question, that and what are the prospects of the bilateral agreements? Now, Swadeshi Jagaran Manch, from where I come, we had been saying right from the beginning, since the uh, establishment of the WTO, since the signing of GATT agreements on trims, and others, we had been saying that in international trade, it's better and much better to enter into bilateral agreements rather than having multilateral agreements. Because in multilateral agreements, there is one tariff you decide, and this tariff would be applicable to one and all. The most favored nation is every nation is most favored nation. And therefore, if you say that bilaterally we decide, that means this is another blow to WTO, but that opens a new path in international trade. And I think that would be a win-win situation for all, because if we enter into in bilateral agreements, and there is a very strange argument, I call it strange. Maybe other people might be very impressed about that, and that if there is no multilateral agreements, then we have to negotiate with each and every country, and that would be a very big exercise. No exercise is bigger than the nation. and this is something needs to be done. If we are able to negotiate with different countries, and we are not having trade with every country in the same quantum. We have different kind of you sometimes US is the biggest partner, sometimes China is there, and other countries are there. Then we can easily have, and we already are working on the bilateral agreements with England, with US, we already have signed agreement with UAE, then with Australia, and many others are in queue. So it's exercise worth taking, and if we are able to negotiate with US and protect our interests. Last thing I would say here that uh, people are very touchy about the tariffs being reduced on motorcycles. It's not going to make a big difference to us. How many people are going to buy that Harvey Davidson motorcycle? Very few. How many people are going to buy a Tesla car? My country is manufacturing better cars than Tesla at much lower price. I purchased a car for 9 lakhs. Then I purchased a better car for 17.4 lakhs. And Tesla car starts at 45 lakhs or 50 lakhs. So who is going to buy that Tesla car? I've been writing on this. And therefore, we, and US is a high cost economy. And therefore, we don't have any danger of imports coming in very big number from US. So we should not be very much worried while dealing with US on industrial tariffs. But yes, on agricultural tariffs, since US is not working on efficiency, they are giving huge subsidy to their agriculture. So that is a big danger, and that can cause harms to our farmers, and therefore we have to be very cautious about that.
Thank you, Dr. Mahajan, and for taking time out from your busy schedule and breaking it down so lucidly. And we'll continue to keep tracking this issue, and we would get back again to Dr. Mahajan next week and take stock of the situation, because it's a pretty dynamic situation which is changing rapidly. And what we need to do is to make sense out of it, because there is too much of jargonizing. And as Dr. Mahajan rightly pointed out, and I also realized before this podcast, I was also very touchy about the import of high-end motorcycles and the tariffs if they get reduced. So it makes sense basically, that we have a space for trade-offs in the high-end sector basically, where the U.S. Economy has produces goods on very high cost. So even if the tariffs are reduced, the import duties are reduced, so Indian market would still be safe. It has its own space. And thank you again, Dr. Mahajan, and we'll be
Thank
back
you.
soon with another podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aranji. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.